Well, hey everybody, welcome to the podcast, and got my buddy Span online here, and we're going to be talking about the most latest and greatest of things involving our wonderful society and everything happening right now. It's been a little bit of a blister or a little bit of a just blizzard of stuff coming through lately with everything society wise. But just to jump right into it's been kind of crazy this week. I mean, 52 arrested, 4 dead, 14 DC police officers injured amid the riots. And, one of those people, the young lady who was an Air Force personnel, she ended up passing away. And I guess the biggest thing for me is, as I'm looking at this entire situation unfolding, I'm just like, at what point do people realize that, there is no black terrorism, there's no white terrorism, it's just terrorism. And to me, you got to call it what it is. It's like when I look at what happened, I'm just like, are you kidding me? What do you think, man?
think before you can get to that point, you have to have white Americans recognize minority personhood. Like the idea of terrorism is, like you said, it's not linked to a race, it's linked to a group of actions. And when you have a group of people in this country, specifically white Americans, not all, but unfortunately, it would seem a majority if we go by voting rolls right now. So you would see a majority of white people in this country who, for some reason, are still unwilling to see Black people as individuals with sovereignty and agency over their own actions and deeds, individually as well as a group. And those things don't have to be treated with a level of violence and cruelty that you seem to not see with the same group. There was a picture I saw of them. I saw like a billion memes on yesterday, because of course. And the picture had this woman who was kind of like in her 50s or maybe 60s, and she had like her mask on, and she was overweight, and she kind of looked a little doddery. And the line underneath was, does this woman look like a criminal mastermind to you? How do you think she got in the Capitol if she wasn't let in? And I was like, I mean, she looked to be a 240-pound overweight white woman in her 50s. I have a feeling she was not scaling walls. I don't think she was backflipping over a barricade and like knocking out staff so she could get in Nancy Pelosi's office and pee in a closet. I think she was literally just walking in with the other people because they kind of let them walk in. I saw several videos on Twitter of like the Capitol Police going like, "Come on in," and like people just like, "Yeah," like walking in with Confederate flags and like Trump flags and everything else, and just going hither and thither and just running amok inside the building. And I'm not saying that they let them inside to let them do whatever they wanted to, but they let this unruly bunch in who had been planning online for the last several weeks since Trump's rally was announced that they would go and storm the Capitol and get in the way of this vote. Like everybody knew they were unsatisfied with the electoral count going the way that it was, and that they were looking to interrupt it however they could in hopes that they could stop the president-elect Joe Biden from officially taking on the title of president-elect as would dictate under the rules of the Electoral College. So it had to be clear to someone in power that they would be up to shenanigans, but someone out there was like, no, let them in. They're just tourists. 100,000 disgruntled tourists coming in at the same time because they all at the same time just want to see the Capitol. That's all they want, just to see the Capitol. And it's like, if it was 100,000 Black people looking disgruntled that just wanted to see the Capitol, do you think it would have been 52 injured or 52 in jail?
Nope.
You think it would have been 4 dead? And mind you, The four dead are all dead of their own volition. I'm not saying they deserve it, but three of them are dead because of medical emergencies incurred in the instant. So I imagine like the 240-pound white woman, she had a heart attack or something. They couldn't get her out fast enough. And then there was the one chick who tried to climb a barricade with guns pointed at her, who got shot.
Wow.
So it's not like a Black Lives Matter thing where they're out there, protesting, and the cops kind of line up, and then they get on one knee so that they can put their riot gear on, who then stand back up and start shooting tear gas into the crowd and hitting people with rubber bullets, which we saw video evidence and picture evidence of, and so much testimony of all summer. Like, it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like a joke. It's like, I try to be more positive, I guess, when it comes to these things and more an objective viewpoint, that kind of thing. But it was just an absolute disgrace looking at this. I'm like, how are you guys like so amped up and like ready to do all this violent stuff? But then you say, oh, Blue Lives Matter and this and that. But it's like, you're attacking the cops. It's like, guys, what? Where does common sense come into play here? It's just staggering to me that nobody said it was like looking at something like from high school. It's like you do this stuff in high school. You do stupid stuff. You scale walls. You vandalize some stuff. That's high school stuff. You got grown men and women scaling walls and breaking out windows and just total anarchy. It's insane.
Well, you said hurting the police. What's funny is Republican congressmen and women at the state and federal level have been defunding police and first responders for decades. Mm-hmm. They've been siphoning money in the form of tax dollars out of all communities, but not putting it back into areas where you have predominantly Black communities. So you have fewer and fewer cops where it's needed, and then too many cops where it's not. What you have is this disjunction of policing, which is causing all these unfortunate situations with minority and poor people being disproportionately policed.
Yeah.
And all this has been caused not by Black people, because we don't quite wield the levers of power. We just had a president for 8 years, and we still don't wield the levers of power. They have kind of decided that they will continue to put minority and poor communities in positions where they're not getting the type of protection that they could use so that their communities could flourish.
Sure.
Absolutely. Despite the fact that they're still paying taxes at the jobs they work, despite the fact that they're taking whatever kind of government benefits in order to survive, in order to feed their families, in order to get medical care for their families. So, I mean, Black folks and Latino folks and the poor and other, and I'm not trying to say that Blacks and Latinos are the only poor folks. There's tons of poor white folks out there, but for some reason, poor white folks don't seem to hit the same suffrage levels as we do. Now, they do suffer, but for some reason, the majority of them keep voting Republican, and I don't understand. And a chunk of them showed up at the Capitol building to protest this election. I'm like, guys, don't you understand? The guy who sent you out here is the one who's taking your rights, who's taking your abilities, who's taking money out of your communities. Like, don't you see that?
Mm-hmm.
No. No, exactly. And I totally agree. I mean, when I looked at the fact that, even if you took race out of it, the staggering thing to me is that you have a group of people who you're essentially intimidated by, afraid of, whatever you want to call it, where you send riot police and army personnel to govern these people or regulate these people during a protest. And I'm talking about Black Lives Matter. But then it's like you have little to no security for the people who ultimately almost tried to kill you. So it's like, where is are you not getting this memo? You literally had a group of people who were white that almost killed the people who were white. And it's like there was no relevant thought to, hey, maybe I should beef up security regardless if they're white or Black. maybe I should beef up the security in this case because I have a lot of angry people coming towards the Capitol to do some potentially angry things. That's what's staggering to me. It's just unbelievable.
The FBI announced that the single most dangerous element to America was domestic terrorism in the form of white supremacy. So we all know there's an overabundance of white supremacists that also happen to be fans of Donald Trump. So Donald Trump was going to have a rally the same day they were going to certify the election in Congress. And Donald Trump had been saying that he wanted to disrupt that because he wanted to stay president for another term and possibly more. So it never occurred to anybody, the FBI, the CIA, Department of Homeland Security, that maybe, just maybe, we could have a bunch of people who were dissatisfied with this process of democracy and wanted to overturn it to insert their president back in for another term. Like, it begs the question, maybe, just maybe, they let him in? I mean, I'm not going to use the evidence of video of Capitol Police letting people through the barricades. I'm not going to use the evidence of Capitol Police taking selfies with some of the rioters and some of the terrorists. But what I will say is that it seems awful weird that all the people in power who know white supremacy is dangerous in this country knew that some white supremacists might be in this mob, and no one thought to lock the door.
Right. Exactly.
Like, we know that if somebody says, "We're coming for you, Negro," we will lock our door. Okay? Why is it that the Capitol Police never thought to do that? That the FBI never thought to suggest them? That the DOJ never thought to go to them? Hey, you guys might want to lock that front door and the back one and the sides, and maybe investigate the tunnel. Make sure it's clean in case we got to put a lot of bodies down there. You know, like, none of that seemed to be in play. And there's going to be a large investigation in about 2 or 3 years on the Netflix documentary. We're going to have somebody talking about who got in trouble. And there's going to be some people who are probably going to quit or get fired very quietly. And we're going to find out about it in that Netflix special. And we're all going to be like, wow, that makes sense. That's why that went down that way. Because there's no other explanation for why a whole bunch of people who had been plotting for weeks on Facebook, on Parler, on Reddit, and Twitter, that no one seemed to know that these people wanted to storm the Capitol, even though they've been saying it on social media for almost a month. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I try not to assume, but I don't know.
There's definitely something awry because that makes absolutely no logical sense to me that you look at a situation like that and you say, oh yeah, like you said, just come on right in the door. It's like, and I'm looking at it as it unfolds, and you're absolutely right. I'm like, why is that door not guarded? I worked security before, and I think you have as well, and you usually check the exits before you start an event. You check the exits.
I worked in a strip club, bro. I knew. Close the door.
Yeah.
If you think there's a guy out there with a gun who might want to hurt the girls, close the door.
Secure
if you
the
think
door.
There's a guy out who might want to shoot the DJ because he didn't play any Jodeci when he wanted, close the door.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah.
But Fox News. The idea of Fox News began during Watergate, because Roger Ailes, who was an assistant to Richard Nixon, watched Watergate happen. And he said, you know what? If there was an exclusively conservative news service that would support the president in a time like this, then maybe, just maybe, the president could survive a scandal like Watergate. Soon thereafter, he got with Rupert Murdoch, and he started Fox News. Fox News was a conservative leading organization specifically designed to support the conservative side of politics. Now, here's the deal. If the birthplace of your news organization, the genesis of your idea, is to cover up for a scandal, that don't bode well for your news organization. So you fast forward, let's see, that was Watergate was like 78. You fast forward 20 years to about 1998, and you watch while Bill Clinton is president, and all of a sudden, all these Republicans don't seem to be focusing on what it is to govern anymore. They don't seem to care about what it means to actually make their constituents want to vote for them, because they pulled some of that government money from the state or the Fed to make their lives better. They just decided, we're just going to start saying whatever we want that will ensure that we stay in power. So we will message our people, we will use talking points that villainize the other side, and will hopefully make our people want to vote. And then, fast forward a few years after that, a whole bunch of people get together and they realize, well, since we've decided we're no longer actually going to focus on governance, we have to decide how on earth we're going to keep getting elected. Because governance is how you get elected unless you have a plan. So they started coming up with ideas for voter suppression. So they focused on Black and Latino communities and poor communities because they tend to be in areas that vote Democratic. So they started voter ID laws. They started closing polling stations. They started gerrymandering, and they started gerrymandering hard. And all these plans really came to fruition in 2010. In 2010, they had the census data and they had the software, and they gerrymandered the hell out of this country. Mm-hmm. This country, okay, just so you know, Democrats have won the popular vote for president in every election for the last 20 years except one, and that was 2004. So Democrats have won every popular election, 2000, 2008, 2012, 2016, and again in 2020. Go back two more, again in 96, again in 92. So it's like you're seeing a trend here. We're going 30 years almost, no, pretty much 30 years right around, where Republicans can't really get more people to vote for them. But why do they have so many state houses? Why do they have so much power and so much say in what we do? In fact, there's a host named Chris Hayes on MSNBC who did the math and said if you spread out 70,000 votes between a few different states, Trump could have won the election.
Yeah.
Biden won the popular vote by 7 million votes, but 70,000 votes spread through certain states. Boom. Mm-hmm. Now, that is not democracy. That's ruled by a minority. But again, the Republicans have long ago decided that they won't govern. They will just try and figure out all the ways they can to grab onto and maintain power. And that's the entire focus of the Republican Party. It's not to put your tax dollars at work on your benefit. It's not to make sure that you have health care for yourself and for your kids. It's not to make sure that there's job opportunities for you, your wife, and your kids. It's not to make sure that cars are coming down in cost and becoming more efficient. It's not to make sure that our power grids are more sustained. So if through some reason, through some possibility, the Russians could get in there, they can't really affect our infrastructure. They can't mess with our water, our gas, our sewers, and gum us all up in case they want to come and invade us. Like, because these things aren't getting done, we are at a competitive disadvantage. And this is all because the Republicans have decided they will no longer govern. And it all started back there with Roger Ailes back in 1978. We are going on 42 years of a party that has decided that deceit. And mind you, I'm not saying the Democrats don't deceive. Absolutely they do. When it comes to power, there are lies to tell in order to maintain it. I'm not deceived. But when it comes to one party versus another, on the whole, the Republicans have decided that governance is not for them, deceit and power grabs is their only way to exist. So I understand when people say they have to vote Republican because of how they were raised, or the people they know, or how they grew up, or where they are. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's acceptable. I understand where it comes from. But these people also have to understand they're not voting for a political party. They're voting for a power grab arm of our government.
Yes.
And that's how you come to autocracy. Mm-hmm. And that's where we are headed if we at all decide to vote Republican. Whatever your issues are, whether they're abortion, whether it's religious rights, or whether it's gun rights, none of that matters to the Republican Party. All the Republican Party cares about is villainizing the other so that you vote for them, so that they can stay in power and take more power and more power, choose who gets to vote, choose how they get to vote, till eventually you have no option but to choose them. So voting Republican is literally a detriment to your health from top to bottom.
Absolutely right, and that's what I'm noticing myself as well. Is that I'm looking at it from a standpoint whether you want to define it as mental illness, greed, a toxicity to the soul, whatever you want to define it as. When you look at the patterns and the thought processes and what the actions are at the end of the day, that to me is more telling than what you should stand for. I could tell you, hey, I believe this and I believe that and I believe this. But at the end of the day, if my actions are saying something else, my brain immediately kicks in and says, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm, like you said, being deceived. Maybe this is a lie. Something's not right because you're telling me one thing, but your actions are doing something totally different. That, to me, is a sign of either mental illness, greed, or some kind of toxic something going on with you. Because you can't tell a person to go left and you're going right, and while the person's going left, they're getting attacked by alligators, and while you're going right, you're collecting money along the road. That doesn't make any sense. And you got to have that common sense. So, anyway.
Yeah, it boggles the mind how people would actively choose to vote for someone who is not working to their benefit. Like, we have the UP in Michigan. My girl is from the Upper Peninsula. She's white, for the record. Gorgeous. I love that woman. But she's from the UP. And they tend to vote predominantly Republican. And from their perspective, as she had, or it's kind of gleaned from her intellect, that they kind of think of it as they want the government out of their affairs. So they vote Republican to keep the government out of their affairs. Here's the problem, though. They definitely want the government to get into their affairs when they can't afford health care. They definitely want the government to get in their affairs when they can't find a job. They definitely want the government to get in their affairs when they're injured and they can't work, and so they want to get disability. You see the hypocrisy here?
Right.
And it's like, and you see this all over the country. Never mind the fact that when's the last time Republicans came up with something that was like, hell yeah, Republicans, thank you, you know?
I can't think of anything.
The last thing I can think of, honestly, and there have been things since then, but Nixon came up with the EPA. I mean, the Republicans have spent the time since neutering it, so it made it difficult to protect our environment. But a Republican decided we should probably have a government agency whose entire job is to protect the land.
Yeah.
Brilliant, right? Mm-hmm. What an idea. That was Richard Nixon, yo. Like, since then, what have the Republicans done that's been like, golly, man, we are better off because that Republican did that one thing that one time that makes it better for us. Shucks, I'll tell you one thing I just realized. Obamacare was based off of Romneycare out in Massachusetts. Yeah, like Romney came up with the idea of Romneycare. Now, I don't know the idea of like, was it pre-existing conditions? Like the fact that insurance companies can no longer discriminate due to pre-existing conditions, which is the single most powerful aspect of Obamacare. I don't know if that was present in Romneycare, but it was definitely present in Obamacare. And all the estimates say from the Government Accountability Office that Obamacare has kept millions of families out of medical debt because of how they had access to it. Yeah. So
Yep.
Absolutely, yeah. My brother had gotten sick a few years ago, and that doctor bill came in. I mean, he had a pretty significant sickness, and the doctor bill came in at about a little under $100,000. I don't know about you. I don't have 100 grand sitting around. So my family and I were just looking like, wow, this is going to be a huge problem. You know,
Yes.
it's like
Yes.
that's like you got to take out some like a second mortgage or something like that. And
Yes.
luckily, at the end of the day, they forgave the bill and everything. But that's a huge problem for a lot of Americans right now. And if it's not 100,000, it's probably even more than that. I know people who have been sick, paralyzed, and they have bills that are running 6 and 7 figures in the hospital. So it's definitely a problem.
So what are we doing to make that better? Now, there's ideas out there, but ain't none of them coming from Republicans. Like there's not a single idea you can think of that you're like, damn, the Republicans came up with that. That was amazing. Like I feel so much better because
You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's a challenge. I off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, and I'm usually good at statistics and also like common, everyday things. But I can't think of one thing that comes to mind that has been done. Yeah.
It's
yeah,
a challenging question.
yes it is. Yes it is. And it's like I don't want to blame Republicans for the entirety of our ills. Okay. In the end, we're Americans, bootstrapped. But it's like we kind of feel like we control our own destiny. Like it's not up to the politicians, even though we vote them in and out. It's up to us. And
Yeah.
the idea that one of our parties actually has ideas and the other doesn't is like, I don't know. And then we come back full circle to yesterday, where you have 147 people who are elected officials trying to tell us that the election we all voted in is invalid because they think there are irregularities. And they know there were no irregularities. And then they still maintain that position even after a seditious attempt by a bunch of numbnuts who tried to take over the Capitol building. Like it's like you have no soul. How on earth can I understand? I cannot understand how each one of those guys is making somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000 to $220,000 a year and getting the best health care imaginable on my tax dollars, while I have to figure out my own problems on my own while I'm paying them. That makes no sense.
The level of greed and power and everything else is just staggering. Again, I don't know if it's like something in the water. I don't know if it's physical, mental, spiritual, whatever it is. There's something seriously wrong if you're coming to the place in life where you say, "Hey, if I got to kill a few people, let's just go ahead and do it. As long as I make more money." It's like there's something wrong with you.
Like
Yeah.
our country represents 4% of the world's population. Okay, 4% of the world's population. California is the sixth largest economy in the world. California, the sixth. There's 3 billion people just south of Russia and north of, I think, the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
It's 3 billion people right there. California is the sixth largest economy in the world. The United States is the largest economy in the world. And people are like, oh, well, China's catching us. Yes, they are. But they will never be able to produce on our level because everything has to be controlled by the government. Here, we regulate industry, we don't control it. Big difference. Our CEOs are not going to disappear for a few months and come back from a re-education camp. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
like you can invent something here and get to own it and make money from it. Like you can do that over there in China, so long as you don't piss off the Chinese government. I mean, shucks. Elon Musk, SpaceX, he has Tesla, and he has said some stupid ass things about government officials, about other people. Ain't nobody trying to throw him in jail for running his mouth. People still support his businesses. And that's why this country, despite having 4% of the world's population, is the largest Largest economy by a distance. Like,
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the videos. Please feel free to like and subscribe at the bottom. And please leave your comments. We want to hear from you. We want to hear about ways of reconciliation. And we also want to hear about subject matter you want to talk about on the show. So give us a shout, like, subscribe, comment.